Today I'm going to be talking about exactly what junior rep coaches and selectors look for, the things that matter and the things that don't, the things you can control and the things you can't. So if you're looking to make a Harold Matts or an SG ball squad, if you're in New South Wales, or if you live in Queensland, it could be Cyril Connell Carp or Mal Meninga, pay attention and I'll give you the ins and the outs of what you need to know. So why am I talking about this today? Well, the number one question we get asked right back from when we started the Academy 9 years ago, and it's still the number one question, is how can I make reps? First, it's usually the player asking, Joe, do you think I'm good enough to make reps? Or it could be the parent asking, do you think my son's good enough to make reps? And the follow-up question is almost always, okay, so what do I need to do now to make a rep side? Now, I've spoken about this before here in another Joe Knows, but very briefly, if you want to make reps, simply put, you need to become a better player. So let's just take that as a given, yeah? Quite simple. You're working hard, you're putting in 20 to 30 hours per week of training, you're educating yourself, you're getting bigger, stronger, faster and more powerful, and you're becoming more skillful. That's what it means to be getting better. So what's next? Well, like I said earlier, there's a number of things that matter. Some of them matter more than others, and there's things that don't really matter at all. You can also look at it as though there's things you can control and then there's things you can't. So here we're trying to break this all down now for you. Firstly, let's look at the things that matter but are out of your control. And to be honest, there's only really one, and it's the only aspect or quality that is completely out of control. You can't train it, and for the most part, you can't really convince people who select the rep teams to ignore it. And that's your height. Having spoken to dozens of people working within the junior rep system, whether they're coaches, trainers, selectors, or player managers, whenever we bring up the name of a player to advocate for, the first question that comes out of their mouth is, how tall is that person? Now, do I agree that it should be their first question, or that the game has gone down the right path by preferring bigger frames over smaller ones? No, I don't. But we're not talking about what should be or what could be. We're simply talking about what is and the way that the situation is right now. If you Google NRL player heights, you'll be able to look and you can see their heights, and you'll see certain positions where 99% of the players within a certain playing position fall within a certain height range. To take one example, let's look at starting locks from the top 8 NRL sites. Melbourne, Trent Liero, 192 centimetres. Penrith Panthers, Isaiah Yeo, 195 centimetres. The Roosters, Victor Radley, 182 centimetres. Sharks, Cam McInnes, 177 centimetres. Keeping in mind he was a hooker who switched to lock. Cowboys, Ruben Cotter, 180 centimetres. Manly, Jake Trbojevic, 185 centimetres. Newcastle, Adam Elliott, 185 centimetres. Bulldogs, Jamin Salmon, 187 centimetres. So out of the top 8 teams, there was only one lock forward who wasn't 180 centimetres or taller, and he didn't make it into the NRL as a lock, but rather as a hooker. Just so happens that his own personal standards, his elite mindset, toughness, resiliency and leadership has meant that he's managed to carve out a niche for himself. But he's the exception that proves the rule. They want height. And so this is what the coaches, scouts, selectors, this is what they're trying to pick for. Remember that from the club's point of view, rep teams, they're not about giving a kids a go. It's not about rewarding kids for working hard during the season. It's simply the first step in a process for a senior club to start to filter through the players within any given age group to find the ones that they believe are sufficiently talented and have the tools necessary to progress through to the next level. They value height. So if they have 2 players that are of a similar playing ability and work ethic, they'll pick the taller one 9 times out of 10 over the shorter one. So yeah, height matters. And yes, it's completely out of your control. So deal with it, move on. Now, closely related to height and almost just as important is size, wherein there are certain players that have been born with certain physical traits, and those traits automatically put them in front of you. And just like height, one of those is size. Again, I'm not saying I agree with it, but if you have 2 players of a similar football ability, and if their speed and fitness levels are pretty even, they'll pick the bigger kid over the smaller kid. We've had first-hand experience of this numerous times in the academy. To give you a real-world example, I'll tell you about a player we worked with last year. Let's just call him Billy, okay? Billy makes a rep side, or at least the summer squad. We tell Billy and his dad he should keep working with us at the same time as he's in the rep squad, as we believe Billy was too small and that he needs to get the extra gym sessions as well as additional accountability around his food to get to the size that we think he needs to be at to get picked. So dad goes and speaks to the rep coach, who then says, we don't know what we're talking about, and tells the dad that Billy should stop working with us. So the dad says, sorry Joe, thanks so much for helping him get to this point, but we've got to follow the coach's advice. No dramas, jump forward 4 months, and Billy gets cut from the squad after the final trial match. When telling Billy he got cut, the coach tells him that the other player going out for the same position, let's call him Caleb, the coach says that Caleb was 3 to 4 kilos bigger, and that was the only difference between the two. And so they were going to go with a player with the bigger body instead of him. The dad then proceeds to call me back up and say, Joe, you were right. I should have kept Belly in the program. They lied to us when they said he was big enough. Is it too late to come back and start working on his size with you guys? And we've seen this happen over and over almost every single year since we opened the academy. So again, just like height, yes, size does matter. But unlike height, size is something that you can work on within reason, of course. You know, you're not going to add 15 kilos of lean tissue on in 6 months' time, like some boys ask if it's possible to do that. But it is an area that you can do something about if you're willing to spend time in the gym, if you're willing to get yourself and get your nutrition in gear, if you're willing to have patience. And by patience, I mean dedicating 2 or 3 or 4 years to building yourself up. You can definitely do it. Now, you may never be able to build yourself up into like a monster like Payne Haas, but you can definitely get yourself to the point where you've got sufficient size and strength to handle yourself against the top players. Now, the next area is speed. True speed is one of those things that either you have it or you don't. And here, we're not talking about just being fast enough. There's plenty of backs, even more than a few dummy halves, who have more than enough speed to get picked in rep sides. What we're talking about is the kind of speed and or acceleration that stands out every time you touch the ball. The kind of pace that can change a game in an instant and turns the slightest half chance into line breaks and into tries. The old saying is if you want to have speed, then you've got to make sure that you pick the right parents. Or in other words, everyone can get faster, everyone can work on their speed and improve it, but being truly express pace, just like height, is something that you're born with, okay? The next area which attracts massive amounts of attention, which is probably sort of 80% nature and 20% nurture, is your strength and power output. How this is represented on the field is your ability to both deal out and absorb explosive force, whether in attack or defense. You know, think of when you watch a game and you see Spencer Leniu take a run and knock the defenders down like a bowling ball does to the pins. Or Angus Crichton in Origin 2 this year, when he was palming off players left, right and centre. Or basically any time that, you know, that monster Dave Fafita gets near the ball. That's strength, that's power, and it stands out on the field. And just like speed, it's a component that definitely can be improved. And even more so than speed, time, effort, and work in the gym can get most players to an acceptable level of strength and power, comparable with most NRL players. But that top level, the power output of those really heavy hitters, no amount of training is going to make up for the natural ability that those guys have. Now, strength and power usually manifests in the form of damaging runs, tackle busts, post-contact meters, and in defense it's the player who regularly puts on shots, makes dominant tackles, and generally intimidates opposition players. So yes, technique definitely factors into those things, and there's trainable aspects to them, but the game-changing strength and power is usually something that someone is born with. So, your size, your speed, your strength, and your power. These areas, they are all areas that matter, and they are fairly heavily weighted towards being genetic or naturally gifted traits. However, unlike your height, all of these are trainable. Someone can become faster through training. Someone can get bigger through training, and someone can definitely get stronger and more powerful through training. These are all X-factor qualities. They're things that matter when it comes to making reps. They're things that coaches, scouts, and selectors look for. Now, yes, they are predominantly determined by your genetics, but unlike your height, they are all trainable. Like I said, there's a lot you can do if you're willing to put the work in. You can significantly improve most of those areas, and that's what we've been doing with young rugby league players for over 10 years. Improving those qualities to the level where you can compete with and actually beat players with more natural talent than you. But these areas are only one part or one section of what the selectors are looking for. Because it's important to remember, rugby league is not athletics. It's not powerlifting, it's not bodybuilding, it's not sprinting, and it's not a marathon. It is a field-based sport where players with certain physical qualities, with a combative warrior-like mentality, and with a unique set of skills,
are a very particular set of skills,
work together as a team to achieve a certain outcome. So while genetics play a huge role in the physical trait department, there's also a whole host of areas or X factors that are completely trainable and that are not particularly genetic. We're talking about skills, qualities, and traits that every single player can work on. And they're the very same skills, qualities, and traits that coaches, scouts, and selectors are looking for. So for all of the players out there thinking, you know, well, I wasn't born with much talent, or I'm too short, or I'm not lightning fast, so I guess I should just quit while I'm ahead. Here's the thing. There's a whole bunch of areas that, if worked on in a relentless fashion, can become a means by which you can stand out when you play. You can attract the attention of selectors, scouts, coaches, and by extension, you can put yourself in the driver's seat when it comes to making a rep squad. Now we're going to break those traits down now into 3 categories and briefly touch on a few areas that, like I said, are completely trainable and definitely matter when it comes to making a rep side. So those 3 categories: defensive traits, offensive or attacking traits, and the warrior mindset. Okay, so first let's look at defensive traits. Here we're talking about punishing defense. This is the kind of defense where you're moving up, you're putting clean shots on opposition players, stopping their momentum instantly. You're hitting to hurt, you're intimidating the opposition, and you're dominating your sector of the field. This stands out. This stands out to selectors. Next, effort on effort. This is where the simple act of making your tackles can be of massive benefit. It's where you might make 2 or 3 good dominant tackles in a row. Let's say you might make a great 2-man up high tackle where you've got great contact, you control the tackle to the ground, jump up in a first marker. Once the ball is played and you push across into the defensive line, covering the inside shoulder of the next man in the line. Opposition pops a ball back on the inside, but because you've been pushing across, you're in the right position to hit that inside runner and make a second tackle because you're making the effort to get there. So effort on effort does get noticed by the people that matter. The next area is ruck control. Every time you make a tackle, you manage the contact, the tackle, in such a way that you control the speed of the play of the ball. You're slowing it down, you're allowing your defensive line to get set, and you do it all while not giving away a penalty for laying in the ruck. Next, we've got decision making and positioning. This is a trait that's useful both in attack and defense. Knowing where to be on the field and when you need to be there. Knowing what needs to happen and when it needs to happen. In defense, that could mean wingers knowing when to drop or when to hold in the line. For a fullback, it could mean knowing that there's an overlap on the short side and you may need to push up in the defensive line for that one tackle to shut down a blindside raid before pushing back to fullback again. Or a centre that knows he's short on his side of the field and so he jams in with his winger to snuff out a play before the opposition can take advantage of an overlap. And finally, we've got communication and leadership. So players that talk, provided that it's useful, positive and on point, they stand out as leaders and bring a certain energy and cohesion and unity to a side. And this is something that will help sides win games. So again, just to summarise those defensive traits we're talking about, we're looking at punishing defence, effort on effort, ruck control, decision making and positioning, and communication and leadership. These things will stand out in trials, okay? Next, when we are looking at offensive or attacking based traits, we're talking about things like passing skills, particularly for spine players, but everyone on the side needs a minimum level here. We're talking about line running, which I think it speaks for itself. Sometimes there's someone who may not be that strong of a ball runner from a strength and a power output point of view, but they can make up for it by learning how to run really good lines, exposing weak points in the defence. Next, we have offload skills, particularly for middle forwards, edge back rowers and centres. If you play in a trial game, let's say you have 7 runs and you make 6 offloads, that's something that gets noticed, okay? That's X factor. Offloads create second phase play, they create a broken defensive line, fast play the balls, they create line breaks and ultimately lead to points, so they get noticed. Play the ball speed, particularly for forwards as well as back 3 players. Oftentimes a good set can be triggered by one quick play the ball at the start of a set and the defence they never fully recover. Good things happen off the back of a fast play the ball. Again, that's something that gets noticed by selectors. And finally, we've got position-specific ball handling skills. Spine players need to be great, they've got to have great hands for distributing the ball. The back 3 need great hands for kick reception. And middles need good ball handling skills to be able to offload and palm or fend in traffic. So to now summarise those attacking traits that we're talking about, and by no means is this everything, this is just a few of the things. Your passing skills, line running, offload skills, play the ball skills, and position-specific ball handling. Now the last area, or X factor, that coaches and selectors look for when picking a rep side is a warrior mindset, or what can sometimes be seen as hyper-aggression. When used in a controlled manner, it's worth its weight in gold. Every team needs a player or two that the opposition is scared of. We even see this in the NRL. When a team is missing their main enforcer, the forward pack lacks a little bit of sting and can struggle to contain the opposition pack. Think of Jared Warrior-Hargraves or Victor Radley at the Roosters, or James Fisher-Harris and Liam Martin at the Panthers. All right? That's that hyper-aggression. So, to summarise, yes, height matters, but you can't do anything about it, so move on from there. Next, you have your size, your speed, your strength and your power. Again, these are all areas that matter, and yes, like height, they are fairly heavily weighted towards being genetic or naturally gifted traits. However, unlike height, all of these are trainable. If you're willing to put the work in, you can significantly improve those areas to the level where you can compete with and actually beat players with more natural talent than you. And finally, you have the predominantly skill-based traits, which anyone can work on, which anyone can develop. punishing defence, effort on effort, ruck control, decision making and positioning, communication and leadership, passing skills, line running, offloading skills, play the ball speed, position specific ball handling skills, and let's not forget the guy on that side that absolutely loves to intimidate the opposition. So if you want to see how far you can go with your rugby league, if you want to see what your ceiling is, then accept that there are areas you can't control, there are areas you can control with a lot of work, and then there are areas that are entirely within your control. Focus on developing as many X factor traits to your game as you can. Focus on becoming a more complete footballer. You may not be fast, but get as fast as you can. You may not be particularly strong or powerful, but you need to get as strong and powerful as you can. And become adept at knowing when and where to use that strength and power. By developing your skill and footy IQ, you can get more out of the speed, strength and power that you do have. Become smart enough to know you don't try to outmuscle the opposition front rower who's bigger and stronger than you, but rather you run a great outside inline, put on some late footwork and run at the weak side shoulder. Essentially, you pick and choose which battles to engage in, and you only engage where they're weak and you're strong. This is how you start leveling up as a rugby league player. Trust me, because I'm Joe, and Joe knows.